Well, yeah. I think it's interesting, in a way, what's happening in Wisconsin in terms of the Supreme Court and also in terms of voter ID. But I think it's just almost quaint to think in terms of the Democratic Party. Uh, some people might disagree, but I mean, um, it's great. I think that if things are shaping up so that those who think of the red and the blue parties are, always the same now and forever as they've been in the past, well, then it's just fine if the voter ID issue is unglued from some kind of association, and if I don't know anything about the race, really about if men of integrity are somehow listed as Democrat. How is that possible? Not because of some tyrannical establishment among Democrats, but is it some sort of vestige of bygone times, or is there something left alive going on somewhere? Some culture of the Democratic Party remaining. Just seems quaint to me from far off. I imagine if I were in Wisconsin and subject to media in that area. Remember, media anywhere is the boss. Voting is, showing up and pulling a lever or whatever you do, stuffing of ballots in a mailbox or whatever it is now. All of it is a function of media. Every single vote cast. Unless, someone pays particularly no attention to any media for anything at all, and somehow relies on smoke signals. That's when you build a fire and cover the fire with a damp blanket and send signals, and maybe that would get around the media establishment. But basically, it's quaint, I think, even in state politics, to think of the blue and the red. I think, I've said repeatedly that the Democratic Party has ceased to exist nationally. That's what I should have said more specifically, nationally. And now we get reports, signs of life in Wisconsin about being able simultaneously to vote specifically for voter ID and then specifically elect a quote unquote Democrat to the Supreme Court, or one or two or three, I don't know. What does that mean in modern terms? That at the state level, at least in one state, there's still a Democratic Party for real, or just something required in terms of, there's a Republican Party that's vertically integrated from the White House all the way down, and then what? Somehow, nevertheless, there are Democrats and Republicans for state government in terms of the legislature and the executive and even the courts. Well, I just don't even know. That's not on my radar. I don't get any hint of anything of the sort. I have a very peculiar set of things that come to me, and what I'm allowed to consider is all the trash in the world, as much as people can get away with, and not much else. For example, the only information I have on Wisconsin is not much. I mean, nearly nothing. I don't know who the candidates have been. I don't know really how much remains of the Democratic Party in any state. I know it has gone nationally, but it's easy to believe that there are states where there are Democrats, but I don't think it means anything. Because of the vertical integration, even in states where Democrats are somehow nominally on top of something, I don't think it means anything. I know that, for example, it doesn't matter in Alabama whether people call themselves Republican or Democrat. Of course, so few now would think in terms of being a Democrat that, that's just almost bad waste of time to think about that. But in any event, unlike some states, the Proud Boys are today's modern invisible KKK. There was a time when the KKK members could wear their robes, and hoods, and walk, or parade down Main Street in Washington, D.C., or New York, or, just anywhere. Those days are over. They may still exist in some ethereal way, but the Proud Boys are, a distributed group. There's no hierarchical thing, headquarters and all that. They're just people who network as never before, what with the internet, or for that matter, the ordinary telephone. And by that I mean telephony rather than, texting or anything. Just an ordinary telephone. People network whether their specialty is origami or agronomy or the Proud Boys. And I don't think agronomists or origami people are taking over the world or something. But I have noticed in Alabama there's a ruling set of criteria with a wink and a nod, or a telephone call, or and to think that anybody's going to really do something about that is to think about the old-fashioned idea, the hearts and minds of the people. A cliche, wasted, put in the trash bin in the days of LBJ, who wanted the hearts and minds of Americans and Asians to be shaped by his apparatus everywhere. And so now if you even use a term like that, you're suspect. I guess the suspicion is, are you crazy? Are you stupid? But yeah, there's always been, since the beginning of the United States, people came to the New World and killed off enough Indians to move right in, and then they said, well, we're here as a function of virtue itself, an extension of the British hegemony, or whatever, and people thought of themselves as British subjects until they didn't, at which time they thought they could introduce the principle of taxation without representation being the cause for rebellion and independence and so on. And then, of course, all along they continued to kill Indians. They call them Indians, or Native Americans. What else would they be called if not Americans? What might the Scandinavians have named the people, the native people, the native tribes, the native culture? I don't know. Anyway, they killed that off, made rooms for themselves, and I don't know. They came around to the idea of removal of native people onto reservations, where they could drink alcohol, and noticed that they were rather put upon. And the propaganda about America continues. Well, there are many ideas that, notwithstanding the slavery and notwithstanding what happened to the native peoples, there are many things very laudable, commendable ideas about free speech or this or that. And what do we have today? Something that was talked about then was, civic-minded people, the hearts and minds of people who might be thought patriotic about a state that was not totalitarian and somehow frivolous or oppressive. Well, now, the hearts and minds are involved a wink and nod for outrageous ideas. And, the idea of free speech has been set upon by those whose issues are evidently settled in their own mind. I mean, the autocrats in charge of national health can say, oh, well, you can't talk about that. National health requires that we punish you for thinking that we ourselves, your rulers, are out of line. So, what would happen if somebody, just, as a thought experiment, said, I'm against penicillin because penicillin is associated with this, that, and the other. Next thing would be, a charge brought, that you're practicing medicine without a license, or giving legal advice, about some fault with penicillin, or its manufacturer, or anything. In other words, if you did object to penicillin, who knows? Maybe if you said, well, what's happening is that bugs are becoming resistant, and so I'm against penicillin, and also the final effort with drugs, for example, for bugs that are found spreading within the walls of hospitals. Bugs that are just not really found anywhere else, and which are resistant to everything but just the last gasp that we have to overcome certain bugs. Suppose you came out against those for the same reason that many drugs have been said to lead to resistance because they're used indiscriminately or far too often. Suppose you said something like that. In today's environment, you might, if you didn't go to jail, you would at least be shut up with threats. Why? Well, because the arbiters of state of national health might find that, you can't go around saying things like that. It is for MDs and lawyers to say something about that. You can't claim that vaccines are inadvisable. National health people can say something like that, not an ordinary citizen. Frankly, I'm fatalistic about medicine. I mean, after the way I've been treated. So when people came around, do you want to take this COVID? That depends on you. If you feel better, go right ahead. I don't give a damn. Why would I care about COVID medicine after the way I've been treated? But I do know. Although, my health might not be good. Never mind, the particulars. I can say, well, in addition to anything else, there's this question of the First Amendment that seems to be toggled on or off depending on what some czar says about national health priorities. And if that isn't enough, there's still the whole idea of national security. I mean, in other words, from outside the U.S., what does it look like? What does it sound like? Well, of course, I don't really know. As for Wisconsin, I don't know whether with a wink and a nod there is the figurative parade of Proud Boys anywhere in the state. They don't seem to need to parade around in Alabama. They really control Alabama. But of course they still talk about, republicanism, and I imagine there are those who talk about Democrat issues. Nominally, I guess they still have Democrats in name, or even in fact, or whatever, running in Alabama races. But I think of that as quaint, Sort of like, back in the days of the KKK, it didn't matter much about the Democratic Party back then. Firstly, Democrats controlled Alabama politics. But then on top of that, the KKK was superimposed. Now, though, the touch is very nuanced, I don't know of any kind of particular routine or whatever about the Proud Boys. It's sort of like, that thing about obscenity. You know it when you see it. And there are people who have seen, a lot of people are gone now, who once argued about all kinds of issues. But for a long time, obscenity was a big issue, and somebody said, well, I don't know how to define obscenity, but I know it when I see it, Now, of course, people have fairly good leverage to prevent overwhelming obscenity everywhere, unless one recalibrates and thinks, NPR is obscene, an outrage, an affront to any fair-minded person in terms of who pays for its unusual staying power. Why prop it up? So yeah, you could redefine what's obscene. I think NPR is something that ought to be, gently allowed to try to make its own way, and not for the taxpayer to subsidize some of the most outrageous programming I have heard about, just spaced out crackpot stuff. Well, maybe that's not the same kind of obscenity, as some of the stuff that people would prefer not to just be everywhere. But NPR, in effect, is everywhere, in terms of, oh golly, campus radio stations, everything else. And I think that is really, really bad. So, the matter of obscenity could be debated, but I don't think anybody's interested. I'm glad to think that maybe somebody might think to pull the plug on NPR. Now then, about, what is it, Radio Free Europe or Radio Free America, all that, I don't know. Is it boilerplate from the State Department, or I just don't know about Voice of America? I don't know. But I have been offended by NPR. To my way of thinking, it's right-thinking people can come to terms, I guess, on where to put their money, their tax money. What's your tax money support? Is it possible to support the performing arts, for example, with taxpayer money? I think there are many things people can look back on in terms of FDR. He demonstrated that that thinking outside the box was not necessarily a sin, was not necessarily a complete waste. The CCC and all the other, people got paid for their graphic arts, for their performing arts, during a time when really America, in a way, kind of collapsed. And I haven't really found people doing a good job like they did, coming forward and saying, well, people can help themselves with their very own tax money, but now so much is channeled along just a few lines that, what is it, $800 billion a year, more or less, for defense. And then people say, oh, that's just a way that, with a wink and a nod, we run our corporate economy, the whole damn kit and caboodle. The Congress is there, to windmill this money straight into big business, and then big business turns around and confounds everybody by saying, okay, fungible sources can go for brick, mortar, and steel, and gas, and then mysteriously somehow there's plenty of money for supporting politics, Republican politics. And in fact, in recent years, Democrats have been much more inclined to listen to corporate America, legitimated by their tax dollars, than anybody else. And Republicans now are making a spirited attempt to say, well, we're for the little guy, not just the rich plutocrats. Well, that's fine. If they really keep trying to help the little guy, well, fine. But do they pull the plug on NPR because NPR is a bunch of crackpots? Or because, in principle, why not just pull the plug on everything that doesn't support, the old idea, if it's good for GM, it's good for America? Those days are not over. Those days are not over. In fact, recently, Trump said, well, he doesn't care what prices affect imported cars, and for that matter, domestic, but, he wants to simplify things, and if he simplifies things the way I expect, then a lot of things just seem to be quaint memories of what used to be, citizenship, one thing or another, all streamlined into very grim politics. Not because, for example, recently I saw pictures of President Trump in the Oval Office with somebody in some sort of red costume. I'm not really sure. I didn't turn on the sound. I just saw that out of the corner of my eye when I was doing some other stuff. And I went, who in the world? What in the world was going on in the White House? It didn't look like Elvis Presley did when he was in the White House, or some others, along the way. But it was some kind of red costume. I don't know. I didn't find out who it was or what. But that's largely because I'm paying less and less attention to any number of things, and so like this. I didn't get any news at all in the last year or two about anything in Alabama at all. Much less a little bit of kibitzing about Supreme Court or Democrats and Republicans. Nothing at all. I didn't look for it, and it was not dumped on me. The fact is, the dirty little secret is the unspeakable atrocity that passes for my information, is just obvious. So, 3 cheers for Wisconsin. The thing is, they got voter ID, and then I'll never know whether they elected anybody good, bad, or indifferent, although it's certainly amazing to think that anybody who isn't Republican is still electable. I stand corrected, you might say. I overlooked the fact that, come to think of it, there are living and breathing Democrats, or maybe just perfunctory Democrats at the state level. But what can I say? What have you done for me lately, Wisconsin? Just a nice place. I imagine Wisconsin is a nice place. They're called the Badger State. Well, of course, I'm badgered terribly every day. The latest thing is it's another rerun of the breakdown of the telephone and the bank, and nobody under the roof here will even answer. Your little starlet named Crystal didn't even say whether she would or would not do anything. She might or she might not, but I haven't written a check. And I don't think she'll ever do anything good. that way, without letting me stew in this flux of indecision that people offer. Oh, but I could go online and read about quantum enigmas and whatever. So, I went through all of that a long time ago, and I look at that every now and then, and I haven't even noticed that people have said anything that prompts me to revisit all of that. It isn't exactly new, but it does interest me to think that they have decided. First, they came up with some new chips that facilitate AI, and now I understand they're trying to come up with ways to facilitate quantum computing and logic and so on. And all I really can worry about is, the effects of diabetes taking a toll, really taking a toll. And not only that, people won't clean the bathroom after that character was installed opposite, to act the way he does. Roll Tide. And all the rest. The surgery apparently was just some sort of existential gesture, Nobody said anything else. The doctor said, I'll schedule it. And, it's really at the discretion of the goons whether or not that takes place. I have no reason to inquire again. I guess because there's no alternative, I'll inquire about some things, but nothing optional. Eventually, toward the end of the month, if I haven't received a new debit card, I'll send an email, probably on the website, asking that another one be sent because the first one was lost this week or something. And I understand how this is developing. It's a function of hatreds, and even worse, simple, stupid hatred doesn't hold a candle to the maniacal form of realism, slavery, whatever. So, in a way, it's so familiar that you might even think it's, something casual for me emotionally. What can I expect? I don't think Wisconsin politics makes much difference. But somehow, the way things are brought to my attention, it seems a little bit strange and doesn't argue against what I've said about the death of Democrats coast to coast. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, I've seen their failure. And of course, that doesn't imply that the alternative is some great success by Republicans. I think the evidence doesn't support any statement like that. And with a lack of free speech, I imagine a lot of people say, well, never mind, I'm just going to shop for a new pickup truck or go out for some sporting event or whatever. It just doesn't matter.